Hello, I'm Mark Baer. I'm with Wendy Askew, who is running for the Monterey County Board of Supervisors, the election March 3rd. And so welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Yeah, so before we get into the bigger questions, just kind of give me a summary of who you are and why you're running.
My family has been living in Monterey County I'm fourth generation, raising my fifth generation son here. This is my home. I've had the opportunity to work serving District 4 with the Monterey County Board of Supervisors, and District 4 would be Seaside, South Salinas, Marina, Del Rio, Sand City, CSUMB, East Garrison. We have about 41,000 voters in that region, and I've been working in the Board of Supervisors office for the past 10 years, working with people on issues of public safety, on health and human services, on issues of affordable housing, homelessness. The list is long, and when the seat became open, it was the kind of opportunity that you had to look around and say, I can't not do this.
And you're having fun.
Yeah, I know, it's fascinating. I am having the opportunity to talk to people who I wouldn't have otherwise had the chance to sit down and talk to. I feel like I know my community pretty well, but this just opens so many new doors to have additional conversations. I'm getting to canvass neighborhoods and knock on doors and just talk one-on-one with voters, and it's a pretty incredible experience.
Because I've known you for some time, and I've watched you kind of grow into this, and you embrace doing it, and you were pretty fearless to get in. And I've seen you're developing these skill sets along the ways. But what I want to talk to, we were talking a little bit before the camera started rolling, is part of what you're learning is how to distill a message and get it down to a sound bite and get into a simple thing and a simple slogan and promise something and paint a picture and be charismatic and all those things that are of politic. But the problems are complex,
right? And
the needs are complex, and the solutions are complex,
right?
And there's a little disconnect to where there isn't a simple answer. The answer is complex. Let's just talk about how complex it is.
Yeah. So, running for office, our community deserves to have leadership and elected officials who are honest, who operate with integrity, who are transparent in their communication and in their actions. And so running for office, I'm asked to sort of people say, well, what are the top 3 issues? And I'm like, well, what are your top 3 issues? Because I could talk in great detail and depth about any one of the county's 26 departments. I could talk about the multiple funding streams. I could talk about the political challenges. I could talk about all sorts of level of detail, which I feel like each one of those issues deserves. So if we want to sit here and talk about affordable housing, I could say a lot of things that sound pretty and are very simplified, but clearly the issue of affordable and workforce housing is one that is deserving of a nuanced answer that gets at some of those challenges. And that's the conversation that I want to be having with people. So being asked to simplify everything down, it's challenging.
It's part of what you're doing, but yeah. It's got to be both things, because the issues are complex, and people have to understand that they're complex, and they have to elect somebody who knows how to, like I say, I can talk, but I don't do the details. I've watched you. You're very detail-oriented. You're a very good organizer. You're a very good team builder, and you're a very good negotiator, as I've seen. And so I'm seeing that these aren't talents that you can actually go out and they're not the spotlight talents, but they're the nuts and bolts, the hard work. The workhorse aspect of this.
Yeah, and I think that's what I have to offer, is that I've been doing this work in our communities, with our communities, building relationships with other elected officials, developing the trust that's necessary in order to move important projects forward. We created a year ago the Monterey Peninsula Housing Collaborative, and we're sitting together. We've got somebody from every one of our local cities who sits together, and we're talking about, okay, like, how do we move these things forward? I have a great idea, you may have a great idea. Okay, what are the political realities that we're facing? What are the legislative realities that we're facing? What are the funding realities that we're facing? Okay, how do we overcome those challenges? I can't alone overcome those challenges. You can't alone overcome those challenges, but how do we move forward in a way that works for the community and is addressing all of these different pieces of barriers that we've got to overcome? Another example of that, I think, is with the Seaside Homeless Shelter.
Well, let's talk about that. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's a multi-pronged.
Oh, super dynamic.
Yes, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the state, so we have a homelessness crisis in Monterey County, in PUSD specifically, where I'm on the board of trustees for the Board of Education. 1 in 10 of our students is homeless. And a report came out last year, and we are among the highest rate of homelessness in Monterey County for students among any of the coastal counties. Our numbers are significantly higher than you would find anywhere else. We have a homeless shelter in Salinas, and we really need to have something on the peninsula. So the state came out with some funds, and we were able to secure $10 million for state dollars to put towards homeless services. We don't have a homeless shelter on the Monterey Peninsula. And the county itself doesn't get to tell the cities what to do. But I do have the luxury, you could say, of having this job where I get to do this work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. So I can put the time into bringing people together. So we sat down with the local electeds. We sat down with the local city managers. We looked at identifying property. We looked at where the homeless overlay zones were. We looked at where we had political support. We looked at where we were going to get sued and have something hung up in court for the next 10 years. We started just breaking down the issues, and were able to find county building in a community that had political and community support for the most part. And we're now going to be opening up a homeless shelter in Seaside with 30 to 40 beds for women and children and families to start being able to provide some services to meet a need. This is one step in the right direction. So much more needs to be done. But it wasn't that it happened just because Wendy had a good idea. It happened because a whole group of people were able to work together. We were able to find the funding, we were able to find the location, we were able to have the city council support it, we were able to have the police department support it, we were able to really tie all those puzzle pieces together in a way that it worked.
How do you see your, if you were going to just break down, what's your particular flavor? What's your skill set? What do you bring at a particular Wendy thing?
I just really like to get things done.
Yes, you do.
I like to see good things happen. I want our community, my great-grandparents settled here on the peninsula, and were a part of making decisions that I now benefit from. I want to make sure that my son or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren someday are able to look back and see that the decisions that I'm making on the school board, in my community, on the board of supervisors, are choices that will benefit the health and the wealth and the vibrancy of our community 5 generations from now. So that sort of long-term vision, really the need to work with people in a way that's respectful and compassionate and hear where people are coming from. We may not always agree about everything, Mark, and I'm sitting in a lot of these meetings talking to folks or talking to voters or talking to folks who want to endorse, and I'm saying we may not always agree about everything, but I will always hear you out, and I will always be straight with you. I'm always going to tell you where I stand on an issue so that we can then talk about it. And my door will always be open in that way.
And integrity. Integrity really matters now. I think there's the same hunger here that there is everywhere in the country. And I don't need to go on about that, but I think there's just this hunger for integrity, honesty, decency, hard work, and vision that things can be done, that it's not hopeless, that problems can be solved with hard work and team building. You know, and never enough money.
And there will never be enough money.
Yeah.
And I think there's some good examples in PUSD that I'm really proud of, right? So in 2010, before I ever had children, I was involved with the school district, supported Measure P, where we were able to secure some much needed facilities improvement funds. We broke ground a year ago on a new gymnasium in Marina that the community had been promised. And we cut the ribbon on that building and played the first volleyball game on Saturday. When I joined the board, the school board in 2015, that project had not been moving forward. But working with the community, working with the other board members, finding staff champions, coming to some really hard conversations about where do we put that building, on which campus do we invest in. We were able then to build the consensus that was needed to move the project along. And our kids in Marina now have a brand new, phenomenal, beautiful gymnasium. Another example was, needing to identify places. We're in a declining enrollment district, so we've fiscal responsibility and fiscal stewardship of those declining dollars is absolutely critical. And what it means is it means making really difficult and unpopular decisions about how we spend less money. Spending less money means changing programs. It means eliminating certain programs or services. So using data for me personally to guide how I see that process moving forward and how I would decide where to make cuts, but then bringing the community along in that conversation. So you're not imposing something on folks, but you're working with them to find those solutions so that we can remain viably sustainable into the future as a school district.
So you have skills and you have core values, because that's really, you have a compass. And again, we were talking before the show, I am generally really, really impressed with the political people in this county on both sides by and large. I found them to be pretty inspiring. I think we live in a very special place.
We do.
That political party isn't as important as ideas and being able to work and get the thing done and relationship building and really hard work. So I've always thought of you really as a workhorse. You know, that's your thing. You don't yell, you don't scream, you don't get angry. You're very mild-mannered. You're kind of just bulldogish, and you move ahead. I mean, that's been my reaction of how you work. And you're new to this in a sense, running for this position for the first time, and you showed no fear. I guess fearlessness is a big part of this.
Yeah, running for office is this crazy, crazy experience. There's really nothing that I've ever done that's been like this.
Yeah.
There's a vulnerability that comes with having to put yourself out there in this way, and I think it's really easy to, from the outside, look in at elected officials and politicians, and I don't like what they're doing, or I do like what they're doing, but having to sort of stand out on that limb. But in the other hand, I have found more support than I could have ever imagined. So with this sort of duality of vulnerability and yet support from every part of the community. We have the endorsement of the Monterey County Democrats. We were just endorsed by the Building and Construction Trades, the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council has endorsed. People that I didn't expect to have support from have reached out with their support. So it's interesting and it's fascinating, and I'm glad I come across as fearless. But I do wake up in the conversations I have with my 7-year-old about, it's okay to feel afraid, and it's okay to do things that scare you, and that it's okay to practice being brave. Comes on a daily basis. I was going into a meeting that was a big endorsement meeting, and I called my best girlfriend and said, I just need a quick pep talk. And her 10-year-old answered the phone, and her 10-year-old said, well, Mom's in the shower, she can't talk right now. And I said, well, I was just calling for a pep. Can you give me some advice? I'm going into a really important meeting. And she said, yeah, Wendy, I can. And she took a minute and she said, Wendy, just walk into the room like they already said yes. and think that they already said yes. And I thought, that's pretty good advice from a 10-year-old.
It's really good advice, especially because you have to ask people for money, which is, I don't know who is comfortable with that. I don't know who is comfortable with asking for money. And you have to learn, and you've learned. And you, as you said, you've gotten more comfortable with asking.
You practice, you get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And I do something literally every day that scares me, but if it's the right thing, and if it's how I can sleep at night knowing I did the right thing, then yeah, it's an awesome opportunity for growth. Yeah.
And I think we live in a place that we're lucky enough that, and I don't know if this is everywhere, but I think we live in a place that problems are solvable, that you can make a difference. And that's, some places you may not be able to make a difference, but I feel here you can make a difference. Do you think about that?
Well, and in local politics, I think that the more that I felt that things at the federal level were out of control and felt uncertain to me, the more that I doubled down on my involvement in local politics and understanding what the local issues were and understanding where I had opportunity to be of service and where I had opportunity to have influence in an outcome. And there's so much opportunity to be involved in local government. We have our cities, we have our school districts, we have special agencies, we have our parks district, our water districts, our fire districts. There's county and city commissions you can be involved in. There's so much opportunity. And looking back, we had some Ivy League program students come to present at the school board last night, and a few of them spoke about wanting to go into political science as a degree. I had no idea as a young person growing up here that the county government existed, what that meant, how significant that one person's voice in that space can be to create change, to speak up when it's necessary for those who don't have a voice around those decision-making tables. And now that I've seen it, I can't unsee the role that one person can have and as a force for good in our community. I can't, there's no stepping back from what I've learned in the last 10 years working for the County of Monterey.
And you're in a time when there's a lot of powerful women running now. So it's historically it's a good time. And
there's a lot of talk about, women versus men, and I think we need diversity in all of our decision-making bodies.
Well,
and
you don't get, I don't think you run into that prejudice anymore. I think people take you as a person, you either can do the job or not do the job.
They do. And when I was first announcing that I was going to run and I was on the phone making my phone calls, letting people know, some of the first initial conversations I had with people, they asked the question, well, Wendy, what about your family? I mean, that's a real thing.
That's interesting.
And at first I was like, well, my son's sitting on my lap right now while I'm on the phone with you, and yes, I have a family. But then I kind of, was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad these people, and I think it comes from a good place, but there are still very real barriers to women running for elected office. There are still very real barriers to women serving in some of these positions. But the value that comes from having a diversity of voices around that table cannot be underestimated. And the example that I want to share with you is when I joined the school board, I was the only person with a young child on that school board of 7 individuals. On my way, dropped my son off at the school in Seaside, the Children's Center, went to a board meeting. We were making decisions about how to spend some of those Measure P dollars. And we were looking through the list of staff recommended projects. And I looked at the list, and then I looked again. I said, wait, I didn't see the preschool. I didn't see the Seaside Children's Center on that list of improvement projects. So staff and everyone went, oh yeah, our preschool, we definitely, so $1 million. I had just dropped my son off at a school that had lead paint peeling from the walls. And it wasn't that anyone didn't want to improve that school site. It was just that they hadn't been there. It wasn't on their radar. So the value that a mom with a young child, that any parent with a young child is going to bring to that experience, that a woman that just has a different lived life experience. My dad was military. We didn't grow up with a lot. We moved year to year, paycheck to paycheck. I understand what it's like to be a family, trying to raise a family here 2 parents working, I've got my child, I have my mom, I have all of these pieces that I'm responsible for as a mom, as a wife, as a daughter, and that's a value and a perspective that comes to everything that I'm involved in.
I'm gonna leave it there. Wendy Root Askew, running for Monterey County Board of Supervisors, and you all vote on March 3rd.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. You're watching Your Town. We'll be back.